Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 392, featuring Mio Markovic, VP of Animation Production over at DreamWorks Animation Television. I have known Mio for a while. Basically when they were starting the division at DreamWorks, and it's grown so much and really fascinating. The enormous amount of work that is being produced out of there is just absolutely staggering. And it's really cool to sort of see, where he came from and how he got to do the kind of things that he's doing. So it's really inspiring in a lot of ways. Kristen, what did you think of Mio?
Yeah, well, his story's really interesting, and he stuck, as I said, with the A's in his career from advertising to animation.
Yep.
And yeah, he just takes us how he ended up at DreamWorks Television and kind of what a small unit it really was in the beginning. And also that, I think also when they started, Netflix sent over a huge order, and it was one of the biggest in TV history. And it was thousands and thousands of hours of programming.
Yep.
And then just from the small group to over 900 people very quickly. And they're doing just amazing stuff. And he also just describes animation as it's a tool to tell stories and it's not a genre. And he hopes it'll go towards more all ages one day. And I think something about a generational thing too. Maybe, right. I think it's starting to turn into that. And you guys discuss LD and R and how it's more adult. But yeah, it's a great episode.
It's great. And it's very true. There's a lot of stuff going on in the history of animation these days. And it's very, sort of he's at the heart and the thick of it. And so it's really kind of interesting to see what's happening in that world. So really great to have him on and to have that perspective from him. So we have a couple of announcements. You can find us out at chaos.com. The first one is Maya, V-Ray 6 for Maya is officially out. So you guys could check it out. So besides all the great advantages that you have from V-Ray 6 for Max, there's also the V-Ray NMesh and the infinite dome, or the finite dome mode, and procedural clouds. There's also cool stuff. There's enhanced USD support that's been added. There's a new V-Ray profiler that calculates the memory consumption and gives you a much better way to debug your renders and to optimize them as well. And of course, speaking of optimization, the fog render is about 30% faster, and the translucent materials are twice as fast. So lots of great updates in V-Ray 6. So check it out. And it's out for public beta right now, but V-Ray 6 for SketchUp and Rhino are also out at this point. So go check this all out at chaos.com. Now, we have a whole slew of events going on in September. Kristen, tell us what we know and where you can find us out.
Yeah, so you can find these out at chaos.com/events. The first one we have coming up is September 15th through 16th. We will be at 3D Base Camp in Poland. And the next event is actually you will be at THU from September 18th through 24th. So if anyone's going to THU, let Chris know, say hi. And then September 24th through 28th, KS will be at Design Symposium Week in Berlin. Right after that, September 26th through 30th, we will be at 3D Base Camp in Vancouver. And lastly, to end September 27th through 29th, KS will be at Autodesk University in New Orleans. So got a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff going on. So again, if you need to find these all out, just go to chaos.com/events for all of the information, dates, and details. Perfect. Now, if people want to know more about the podcast, where can they go, Kristen?
You can go to facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast or chaos.com/CG Garage. And if you'd like to watch us, go to youtube.com/Chaos Group TV.
Perfect. And if you guys have any questions or ideas or about guests or any comments at all, just email us. Feel free to email us. labs@chaos.com is our email. And of course, you can always leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That would be much appreciated. But for now, please enjoy episode number 392 with Mio Markovic.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passé. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, You need to make sure everything has for now.
Very excited to have you on. We've obviously been talking to each other for years over a lot of cool projects that you guys are working on, but I thought this was a good opportunity to get to know a little bit more about you and how you got into animation and kind of the things you're doing now, because it's very interesting, but also just kind of know more about generally DreamWorks animation from the TV side of things, which is what you've been mainly focusing on. So let's start with your past a little bit. What was your background? What got you into computer graphics and animation?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and just happy to be here and finally jump on here and have this opportunity with you. But yeah, I definitely took the long road to animation, and I started out in advertising, actually, advertising kind of communications. And that was kind of my major in college, and originally got out of school and interned in that field, and worked for quite a few advertising agencies and some in-house kind of companies as well, handling their advertising, marketing, and PR kind of. Always like in the visual side of stuff. I did some copy as well. But did that for years. I think I was in it for about 9 years when I got out of college. So I got pretty deep into it. So reached a pretty high level at it. I think I was a director or VP level, like towards the end of my time in it. And was working a lot on commercials, a lot on graphics for advertisements and that sort of thing. But more in a capacity of, like a creative director sort of role and production sort of role. And I found myself really liking the graphics side of it and the things that the people I was actually contracting were doing. And as my job kept getting more and more business oriented, I found myself craving more and more and being on the art side of things. So at, a certain point in my career, I just decided that I was going to, do a career switch. And I ended up, leaving that field. I did some kind of consulting type work and freelance type work, but I went back to school. And I ended up getting a graduate degree in design at Pratt Institute. Where I studied set design and architectural design with the intention of, getting into set design and more of the art direction side of things and eventually work in film or TV. So yeah, it was an interesting road. That was a long program and kind of got me into that side of things. So after I finished my master's degree at Pratt, I ended up working in architectural pre-visualization, and got involved with architectural kind of designs, and of course I specialized quite a bit in lighting also.
Right.
So I got into the aspect of creating the projects for like pitching architectural projects or development projects. And that kind of took me into that field. I worked in that briefly for a few years, with the full intention of getting into entertainment. So I think it was 2-3 years. I worked at a couple of firms and a lighting firm. So, learned a lot. It was really interesting. But for me, it was always the intention of getting into entertainment and really, I loved movies and TV and always loved it and wanted to get into that. So I took the plunge and moved myself and my family, my wife and 2 young children, to California, to LA. And I actually came out with an architecture job waiting for me. But I kind of knew that I probably wasn't going to stay in architecture for a long time, but I wanted to make my way out here and give it a shot and see, maybe I would, decide to stay in it. So I came out, and I worked on some really cool projects. I worked at a company called KGM Architectural Lighting, and worked on one of my first projects when I came out was working on the W Hotel in Hollywood and Vine, which had a lot of really cool lighting opportunities there. And this company, KGM, also specialized in stuff for casinos and a lot of Vegas things. So really like effects and lighting and stuff. So we did a lot of pre-visualization of those kind of things. It was a pretty cool job. I really liked working in it, but ultimately I started to crave to get into the actual features and TV side of things. So I started to kind of look around to get into some freelancing and some visual effects work. And then was doing some of that, but eventually, like I think my first like TV gig was I got hired at Nickelodeon, working.
How did you make the jump?
So interestingly enough, I was taking some classes at Gnomon, School of Visual Effects. Just taking a Maya class because I was more of a 3D Max person. And, I had heard like, oh, you need to get into Maya if you want to work in the entertainment business. There's not a whole lot of 3D Max. And I hadn't had as much luck with it. So what happens, I was taking some Maya classes and I wasn't like in their program, like their whatever it is, their 3-year program or what have you. But I noticed that they were doing this big gallery show there. And I went to the person who handled like student affairs, and I said to her, like, I'm interested in that gallery show. I was like, can I participate? Can I show my artwork? And she said, well, that's for students, for full-time students. And I was like, oh, okay. So, she just told me. She was really nice. Mm-hmm. And that was that. Then I got a call a few weeks later saying that somebody had dropped out of this like kind of showing, and that if I wanted a spot, I was taking a class or two there, and I was like, sure. So I took a class. I participated in this gallery show, and I met quite a few people there. There was people from ILM, I think Pixar, Nickelodeon was one of them. And, I met a bunch of them and started kind of talking to them. And they said, I guess they liked the work that I had. And they contacted me. A couple of them contacted me. Nickelodeon actually contacted me, and I went up for an interview, and I got offered the job. So, so it was kind of a weird kind of story where some sequence of events happened that led me to it. And I started there and jumped right into it. I started working on a series called Penguins of Madagascar. Oh, right. That Nickelodeon was doing, which was a lot of fun. And and then that's how I jumped into it. I think that was like 2009, I think, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny. I have almost identical story because I also came from an architecture background. I had an architecture degree actually, and I worked as an architect and did visualization and all that stuff, and then moved out to LA. And then someone said, "Hey, we need to build all these buildings for Day After Tomorrow. Do you want us?" And so I said, "Okay." And so that's kind of how I made the jump over.
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really interesting because I find that architectural degree, mm-hmm. like even though I don't work in architecture, like taught me some amazing things that are so, transferable into planning, building, approaching, how to take on projects, and, how to like build them from the ground up and stuff. And I don't know if you have the same experience, but I feel like it really was very valuable to me, even though it's not exactly what I work in.
Right. I think that's absolutely true. I think the biggest thing that I learned, because the juries were really, really tough at Rice. It learned to teach me how to have take criticism well.
That, it's funny that you say that because like I had that same exact experience. Like they were really rough.
Yeah, Pratt's a good school. Yeah,
they were really tough, and there was people in tears at these mm-hmm. at these reviews. So yeah, I just had a thick skin, and if somebody gave me notes, like I would never get offended, right. And it was kind of interesting because I found that a lot of people would, and I just had this really thick skin, and I felt like, yeah, like that's part of it, like someone's going to tell you, give you a suggestion and so on and so forth. So yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that. It's definitely a great place for training.
Yeah, it's a great training, and I think it's a great thing. And and you said specialized in lighting, and I was in the same thing. I loved the idea of lighting and seeing how a light fills a space, and this sort of what got me very sort of interested in that field specifically. But well, cool. Okay, so now we're caught up into Nickelodeon, and then you started working on Madagascar. How long did you work at Nickelodeon for?
I was at Nickelodeon for about 3 years.
Okay.
So I worked at Nickelodeon. I was on the Penguins of Madagascar season 3, where I was a lighting artist on that, and then the person who was the lighting compositing supervisor moved on to a new show, onto a new production, and I took her spot basically on the show for season 3. So I started, I jumped in, I did well, and then I kind of got pushed into this higher role. So it was a pretty quick kind of trajectory for me from moving for artists into this kind of more of a supervisor type position. And I think that it helped that I had worked in a different field where I knew how to deal with people and had worked at a higher level. So I wasn't someone that was like fresh out of like school. Like I was had been in the workforce for a long time. So it really worked, collaborated a lot with the art director there and the showrunners. So, I learned a lot actually. It was like a really great opportunity. And the person that I worked with who was the comp supervisor prior to leaving, she was like, really generous with the way that, she let me do stuff and sort of like trusted me. And, it was a really good experience because not everybody does. A lot of people, there's a lot of people who micromanage and that sort of stuff. But this person wasn't like that at all. And it just really allowed me to really, soak it all in basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. That's great. I mean, I think you're right. Also, I came in as someone in visual effects as a new person, but I did have all these skills of like, I understand how to organize things. I understand how to talk to people and communicate. And the fact that you worked in advertising as much as you did even before that is, that was all you had. This is your third career pretty much at this point.
Pretty much. It really was. It's like, I kind of have had three phases to my careers, and it's like, it's really interesting. I've always kind of been somewhat envious of people who knew what they wanted to do and like got it right the first time, but I was not that person at all. I'm somebody who's, twists and turns and sort of like wasn't sure. And, part of it for me is like, I was that person that was, when I was out of high school, like I did not know what I wanted to do. Right. So I kind of had to figure it out. And, I was a little bit of a late bloomer when it came to sort of like career, trajectory and deciding what I wanted to, work in.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. So, was that the point where you jumped over to DreamWorks at some point?
No. So sorry. So after that, I went and I worked on, the centralized team at Nickelodeon for a while, okay. Which is something it was called the core team. And it was like their centralized, CG team that kind of supports and builds out new shows and sort of, does a lot of the development work. And I did that for about a year, which that was really great because you do a lot of things in that 1 year. Like, I did some advertising work for the Ninja Turtles series. I did some shorts that Nickelodeon had started their shorts program. So I worked on 2 or 3 shorts. As well as working on some new properties that were developing, that later became series and stuff. So, and some of them that didn't, but it's like it was like kind of felt a little bit like advertising in a sense to me, where it's like you're working on a lot of different things and see what sticks and what works. And so I was there for about a year, and then I moved on to Monsters vs. Aliens TV show at Nickelodeon, and that one ran for 1 season, and then at that point I made the jump over to DreamWorks. So there was a gentleman that's really well known in the industry. His name is Mark Taylor. and he headed up production at Nickelodeon, and he had moved on from Nickelodeon, and he was called into DreamWorks, and was working early on with Ann Daly, and went back when Jeffrey Katzenberg was at DreamWorks and starting the TV division at DreamWorks, and then I came over with a few people to start the TV division very, very early on. I was one of the first 4 people to come over, and it's kind of a funny story because we had nothing, no folder structure, like no kind of setup. It was like we were starting from scratch, and just kind of making decisions, and sort of like we were like very, very early on, like what renderer are we going to use, and we were like kind of running some tests and trying to decide early on for our first shows, like, oh, do we want to use like Arnold? Do we want to use, V-Ray? Do we want to use, what do we want to do? We ended up, going with V-Ray for a lot of our shows. Mm-hmm. But that was the type of stuff that we were deciding like very, very early on. And, just everything from hair and fur and like, how do we want to do it? And, we had our first few shows there that we were, working on, for this big Netflix order. So Netflix had ordered a bunch of shows from DreamWorks, and we basically had those orders to fill. So we knew that we were going to have to produce these shows.
It was a lot, right? I mean, I remember when we first, it was an insane amount of work.
It was, at the time, what we would say is that it was the biggest order in TV, kind of TV history in a sense, in a sense, because it was new, for Netflix getting into animation stuff, and it had ordered like thousands and thousands of hours of programming. So in that first batch was a King Julian series, a show, a new version of a show called VeggieTales that had existed for a really long time, an adaptation of a children's storybook called Dino Trucks, as well as we did a Puss in Boots series like early on. So we were just jumping into like the deep end, and it was really interesting because early on we were building the assets, and myself and a couple of other people that I had started with, a guy who now I think he works at Animal Logic now in Vancouver, Andrew Hepp is his name, and him and my supervisor at the time is this guy Randy Dormans, who's at Netflix, and Chris Newhan, who's I think he's directing a Lego project now. But those guys, we were all like figuring this out together, and jumping into building our first asset in our new pipeline. And the first asset we were trying to do was King Julian. Mm-hmm. So we were jumping into fur. Like I'm not a fur artist. I did the fur on the first character, and we were just really figuring out the pipe and how it was all going to work. And I remember this funny story early on where I had to present. It was very short notice, actually. They told me Jeffrey Katzenberg is coming down to take a look. So it was Mark Taylor, who's sort of the production head for TV. Mm-hmm. Like looked at this King Julian, and he was like, "It looks great. Let's just show it." And of course, I was like super stressed out about this because I was like, "No, let's not show it. Like this is nowhere. He's gonna see this, and he's used to seeing like all this, amazing like stuff from the feature side and so on." But so I got like 48 hours notice, and it was like stay as long as I can, myself and this guy Andrew, to get this thing ready. Mm-hmm. For Jeffrey to come by our desk to look at this thing. So anyway, Jeffrey came by and he looked at it, and we showed him like the feature one, and we showed him the RTV one, and he was like, he thought it was good, and he said some very nice things, and that was that. And it was nerve wracking, and I didn't know what to expect, but it went really well. And that just started it all. When I think back, like that's the story that I think about when I think about, starting DreamWorks TV.
Right.
And we all used to fit in an elevator. That's the other thing. The TV division used to fit in an elevator, and we took a picture and we said, this is the last time we'll ever all fit in an elevator.
Yep.
This was after a few people had joined. We had about 12 people.
Right.
We really grew. Like, it was unbelievable growth from there. I mean, we were up to about probably like maybe 250 people that first year. And then over the next couple of years, I think we ballooned up to, north of 900 people.
Yeah. I remember at one point early on, it wasn't you, it was someone else I knew who worked at DreamWorks TV. He says, we're hiring like 25 people a week. It was insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just imagine going through all that orientation, getting set up, and like, it's just, it was amazing. But you guys did a ton of work. You still are doing a ton of work, obviously.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it was like, it felt like a once in a lifetime thing, like sort of to create a startup like that. That's also like, has the backing of such a big studio in a sense, and has like, all those great feature properties that were developed to work off of and that sort of thing. So, absolutely. It was a really, really great vibe. And then, a lot of people starting, like you said, training up a lot of people, launching shows, and, sort of getting thrown into the deep end of the pool. And then, pretty quickly after the first year, I think, or like it wasn't even the first year, I got promoted to being CG supervisor. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of CG supervisor centrally for the studio and, for the TV division, sorry. And we kind of built this hub team. We call it the hub team, which was a centralized CG team that supported all the shows. So we had, modelers, riggers, surfacing people, lighting people, all different disciplines were in this centralized team. And then we had sort of like these branches that went off into the production teams, and they had their own like showrunners and art directors and so on and so forth. So it worked really, really well. We were, at the time, we weren't actually on the main campus. We started on the main campus. And then we ended up, as we got bigger, we ended up moving to a building in Glendale. I think it's 655 Central in Glendale on Brand. And then there is where like the enormous growth took place, where I think we ended up with, I think we had like 5 floors at one point. And then that was, piece of it was like developing, building like, the pipeline. And then of course, a lot of our work is done at partner studios. So that's like a whole other big part of it that's
Can you explain that, how that process of how you guys come up, the idea, and how you partner with your studios to do it? Because it's, even with the amount of people you had, it's still way too much work considering how much has to be done, right? Yeah.
So what we would do is we would build the main characters, like our most sort of, I'm going to say like important characters or highly visible characters. Like in King Julian, it would be like King Julian and Mort, and kind of the well-known characters. And we would build those in-house. Right. Mm-hmm. And then what we would do is we would figure out all the nuances and all the little, tips and tricks for building, one of the characters. And then we would document everything, how to do it, like how to name the files, how to set it up, what the render times are. When we run a render, they should be in this range, what kind of machine did we use? And we would run some animation tests. And then, while that was happening, we would be doing, a pre-build of like the main set, props, all that kind of stuff for the series. And then, those would be the examples. And then those examples would get shared with our partners. We would hire, studios that could do like, bigger scale production, teams that had, hundreds of people. And what we would do is we would share those assets with them. We would ship them over along with the documentation. And then myself and a team would fly out to these studios and to spend a week there, 2 weeks. Sometimes I spent like 2-3 weeks at these studios, going over all of the way that we build things. And, we would bring like our specialists from each discipline. They would do their presentations. And, we would do it. We would time it so that it would be happening at the same time as the build was happening. And then we would go back again during animation and then during lighting. So we would be there. We would be walking the floor. We would sit with the teams and, answer questions. And, one of the things that I think was really amazing is to go and see all those groups of people that are so enthusiastically working on it. And it's like, it's interesting because when we think of outsourcing traditionally, I think that there's like, kind of a way that we think about it. And it's kind of like, oh, we're just sending that stuff over there. And it's a little bit of like, kind of like, oh, you just send it and then you get back something. But we treated it very, very differently. And the philosophy of our studio and Mark Taylor, who was the head of production for TV, was that, these people were partners for us. Like they were like very important to our production. And we would, not treat them like a vendor, but treat them like people who we work with as if they were on our team. And, we really, I think, felt strongly about that. And we embraced that and the team embraced it. And so going there, we developed some really great bonds with people and some really great relationships. And, something you learn is that like artists are the same everywhere. Like we all like similar stuff. We all have pride in our work. We're all going to try the best we can to do some, really great work. So it's like a mutual respect thing. And yeah, so we worked really closely with a few of these teams. We had worked with studios in India. We worked with studios in Canada. We worked with studios in Taiwan, some 2D studios, in different areas, the Philippines and different areas. So kind of developing all these relationships. And that's a big part of it, for us. And it's been kind of our secret sauce, basically, of how we get it done. We have a really strong team in-house. And we kind of come up with the recipe and then we sort of share the recipe with people and help them, create similar stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I think obviously it's very efficient, but you also just, you prep everything for them. You give them everything they need. It's all set up really nicely, which is cool.
Yeah.
So obviously, you've been at this for quite a while. I've been doing this 8-9 years now. Is that what it is?
I'm coming up on 10 years at DreamWorks.
Yeah, 10 years. So,
yeah.
So it's you've been doing this quite a while, and you've got a great formula, and obviously it's still a very successful thing. But what were some, besides the growth, what were some of your biggest challenges that you were dealing with during that time?
Well, I think growth is definitely one of them. I think expectations, complexity, were always challenging. I think that as we became better and better at hitting a higher and higher quality, our goal was always like, we want to blur the line between TV and feature quality. Just in general, like we wanted to have people watch it and just sort of feel like they're being entertained and not really think of it as something that's like a notch down, like from feature or anything like that. And so for us, it was like, of course, you have to have great content, great writing. If it's comedy, it has to be really funny, good story. And then, a look that is really selling it and like, kind of really convincing and stuff. And we got really good at it. Honestly, like we became pretty good at getting, really nice results. And, of course, as like render times and load times and, the kind of the frames per second for like a rig and all these things are like critical, right? Like to your production and TV production, when you have, your quotas are so high, your daily or weekly outputs are so much higher than a feature. So that stuff all has to be like, really hitting on all cylinders. You have to keep those, frames per second low, and you got to get those render times low. So figuring that out and tweaking at it, was kind of our specialty. And we got to a point where we can get some really nice quality. And I think that with that came the ambition of the storytellers and the showrunners of like wanting to tell bigger stories, and the studio wanting to tell bigger stories. So I think that over the years, like, I think that one of our biggest challenges has been the balance between, telling stories with really big worlds and big character amounts and counts, and being able to produce it, actually do it within the budget and do it on time, and not break our studios or our partners. And so that I would say is like the biggest challenge for us is just managing expectations, and kind of an area that I've gravitated and moved into more and more career-wise for me as I moved up in the organization, in a sense.
Yeah. So what is your responsibility now?
Well, my current, I'm currently the VP of animation production. So I basically am very involved with vetting like our partner studios. When we are looking for partners, I'm very involved with that, and just making sure that, they're going to be able to hit the quality. They're going to be able to, have the proper production personnel and leadership to be able to accomplish the shows that we're trying to achieve on budget. So I work with a team of people on that aspect of it. That's kind of the business side of it, and I'm sort of the more creative person in that business, that physical production group. Mm-hmm. And then also work with with our CG supervisors and our kind of a VFX supervisor, animation supervisor, to come up and like kind of vet those studios and go back and forth with them to establish pipeline. Another part of what I do also is just what I like to describe as like standing up a show, and that's like working with the line producer on the series, the creatives on a series, and the partner studio, sort of like getting all the parties together, like making sure that everybody understands what the objectives are and like what our parameters are for the series, like what we can actually achieve. And then putting together the team, is part of like a big part of it also. It's like, specifically in the CG roles, I concentrate a lot on that areas, like, trying to find like our supervisors for lighting, our supervisors lighting and comp, our supervisors for animation, and then kind of putting together people who are like have the right talent and skill sets for a particular show, and like assembling that. And so it's kind of like a kind of producer, kind of like standing up shows kind of thing. I'm very involved in the tech side, software planning, software, kind of work closely with the centralized like technology team at DreamWorks, which are fantastic. And that sort of thing. And then I travel a lot and go to the studios and, visit, productions and stuff, and put out a lot of fires, quite honestly. I mean, that's a big part of it, is I put out fires. I try to.
Yeah, that's a tough job.
Yeah.
That's definitely a tough job.
Yeah.
So obviously, over the close to 10 years, as you said, you've done there. How many different types how many shows have you done? Have you counted them?
Ooh, it's got to be, it's over 50, I think.
50 shows.
Yeah.
Different shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't remember the exact number, but I was counting them, including the 2D shows and the CG shows. It's somewhere, it's around 50.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And some of them have many seasons.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have, and some of them, I mean, they're all different size productions and different budgets. I mean, we have everything from the Jurassic Camp Cretaceous, which is kind of like, our highest, budgeted shows. We did a Fast and Furious Spy Racers. We do a lot of shows that like are based on existing features that we did for DreamWorks. So like those two that I named, like Jurassic and the Spy Racers show for Fast and Furious, those were unique because they were things that Universal kind of brought to us when Universal purchased DreamWorks, and that kind of became part of of sort of the DreamWorks family in a sense. And so those were interesting because they didn't have CG, previous CG features. So we had to world build and create those properties from scratch. And there's a lot of challenges related to that. So which was interesting as well. But and then a lot of them is like reinterpreting feature movies like like a Kung Fu Panda or King Julian or something like that. And then we do a lot of preschool, which is, much more, of course, junior shows and a lot of those are original properties as well. So there's a lot. And then there's 2D and there's the 2D versions and CG versions. So in those 50, it's a lot of different types of shows. And so it's a nice portfolio, I think, of different types of things.
Yeah, when my kids were younger, I used to watch quite a few of them.
Nice.
I kind of like the one that kind of took me by surprise that I thought was really good, as I didn't expect it, was Turbo, the snail.
Oh yeah.
It was really funny.
Yeah, that was a funny one. That was a very early one. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one that was like, that's a lot of jokes about the San Fernando Valley. It was pretty funny.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going all the way up to La Canada. It's like, no, you mean La Cañada. It's pretty funny. It's a great thing. And I remember touring your studio over actually on your Glendale, in the building in Glendale. I was like, wow, you guys have grown so much. So it was really impressive, the amount of work that you guys do. And having to manage all 50 shows sounds just absolutely daunting and all those different styles, 2D, 3D, different art direction, et cetera. But you mentioned, obviously DreamWorks does have a bunch of IP and they do spin-off shows from movies, et cetera. But do people come up to you guys and say, hey, I have an idea for a show, or are you guys all still mainly working with Netflix, or are you working with other streamers?
No, we're working with pretty much all the big streamers. Okay. Netflix is still a very, very big and oldest client for us.
Right.
It's so we definitely that's a very valued relationship for us. But we're working with a lot of other streamers as well. We're doing stuff for Apple TV. We're doing stuff for Hulu. We did some shows for Amazon. We're out there pretty much, working with a lot of the streamers. We also, of course, Peacock is part of the NBC Universal family and a streaming, their own streaming platform, which we're starting to do some work with as well. We've definitely branched out. And then as far as shows, I think that we do some originals, of course. We always like to mix it up, original, kind of properties, original IP that we've developed that's not part of the DreamWorks feature library. And then we also do, movies that are based on the features. And again, these Universal properties. We also own something called the Classic Media Library, which is, a bunch of different type of properties that the studio purchased early on. So there's a lot of different areas that we develop from. A lot of children's books have become series. A few of them have become series for us. So it comes from a lot of different places, I think. I don't think that we have particularly a house style. In a sense, where some studios have like everything looks a certain way, in a sense, like we do a lot of different kinds of things, and we do some 2D, we do some other types of stuff like Kipo, which is a really cool, sort of like a Japanese, anime inspired type show. We've done Voltron, which is a pretty unique looking show that's kind of a hybrid of CG and 2D. So I would say it's pretty open and it's kind of what I really love about it, in a sense that like I'm myself and the artists and team, like we're never like really doing the same thing over and over again. There's always some new challenge, something really interesting and outside of the box that we have to work on.
Yeah, I do. I remember the other show I really liked was Troll Hunter. Troll Hunter is what it's
called,
right?
Troll Hunter, yeah.
And that was an original one as well. It was really creative, Great story. It definitely had you hooked. Wanted to see the next episode. So it was a great show. What were some of your favorite shows to work on?
One of my, Voltron was I think Voltron Legendary Defender, I think is the full name of it, is like, that was a really great one for me because, I liked Voltron when I was a kid, and I watched Voltron and I bought the toys and I would, I just wouldn't have thought, like, in my wildest dreams that I would be working on Voltron. Like, fast forward like 30 years later, I'm working on Voltron. And I just thought of, like, in a sense, like how cool it is that, some kids out there are watching this and like it and buying those toys the same way that I did. So that was kind of special for me, is working on that one. I thought just because it had a connection with it. I also really enjoyed working on the Jurassic Camp Cretaceous because, again, like it had a personal kind of connection with me, in a sense that that was, I think, the first time that I really started getting sucked into kind of like high-end graphics for movies, was the original Jurassic. And I remember someone I knew had a Silicon Graphics computer, and I just remember thinking it was like the coolest thing, to see it. And I saw like a documentary where they used those computers to make, the Jurassic effects originally. I guess it was ILM, I suppose.
It was Spaz Williams was the name of the guy.
Yeah. And I think that, like, connecting with that, and, Steven Spielberg came up to the studio and did a talk. And then he walked around and, looked at the work we were doing on Jurassic Camp Cretaceous, and like, just getting to be part of that group, kind of walking around and it's like, it's one of those things where you're like, holy moly, like, Steven Spielberg is commenting on this stuff. Like, this is really interesting. This is, never going to happen again. And it was this sort of like, it's just a little surreal and a little, it's kind of, he's someone who's like, a living legend pretty much. And just to like work on a project that has his name on it and has, our names on it is, that's just pretty awesome. So I would say that those two, I think for me, just had like a personal connection. And then, of course, that first one where, with the Jeffrey story, I mean, that King Julian was like where we, I think that's kind of where this all started, in a sense. And, that won a best animated series award. So it was also like really great, like a great start to the to the studio. So I would say those three for me.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, animation has actually become very, very popular right now, and it's really big in a lot of ways. A lot of people are looking at anime as well. Anime is taking a big influence in the world. And what are your thoughts on that? And also, animation now is also popular for things that are not necessarily for kids.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's really great because I think for me, like, animation is a way, is a tool to tell stories. It's not a genre, right? And I think sometimes it's treated like it's a genre as a separate category. I mean, it's just a tool to tell a story. And I think that, one of the things that's very exciting for me and has been like a goal, long-term goal of mine, is for animation to be a viable choice to tell, adult dramas or action or whatever it is, and for it to not be always associated with the children's market necessarily. I mean, it's fine that it is. I mean, I think that's fantastic that a lot of shows are, but I think that sitting down and watching a movie that is tapping into something emotional, like whether it's drama, horror, or something that's generally associated with grown-up movies, I think is really cool. And I think like breaking those, kind of like those boundaries. And I think that those boundaries have been broken in other countries and other regions around the world. I just think in the American market, not as much, but other than, there's comedies and a lot of fun things in like adult comedy type stuff, but not so much in the drama and that sort of stuff. So I think if it just becomes like a tool where you can make big movies and tell stories that you want to tell, where, maybe if you can't make, a $400 million movie, but you can make you could tell that same story in a feature that's for animation, that's geared towards adults, like that would be really fantastic. And to kind of break those barriers down, which I think we're headed that way. I just think it's going to take a while. I think it's, it's a generational thing. And I think that there's an association with animation as cartoons and that sort of thing. And I think that it's shifting and we'll get there. But that's really exciting for me, I think. And just to see the growth of it and for it not to be a thing that you stop necessarily watching or you age out of, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I did a recording. Actually, I just released it this week with Bill Plimpton. So he's been doing sort of stuff in the animation world, and that's more in that area. But I think Love, Death, and Robots is starting to prove that people really like that kind of stuff. Do you guys see yourself moving into that space, or opportunities to move into that space and broaden some of the stuff you guys are doing?
Yeah, and I think there's always conversation about it. Ultimately, we're a brand, and it's I think that it's what does the brand want to be, what does it represent, and that sort of stuff. So there's always that conversation happening. So I think there's definitely interest. I think the conversation will continue. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, cool. Okay. Well, I know you've got a heart out, so I'm going to be sensitive to your time, but I just give you an opportunity. Was there things that people can look forward to? What are some of the new shows coming out, or things that are coming out soon that people can check out?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of, cool shows that we're working on. I can't divulge some of the titles and that sort of thing, but I think that, we're working on some new shows that are definitely exploring, a new genre and like dabbling into horror a little bit, like still with kind of, still for a younger audience, not necessarily, but I think that that's going to be really, really cool, coming out. I think that, right now we have a Kung Fu Paws of Destiny, show that just came out with Jack Black coming back and doing the voice for it. And that's on Netflix. And that's really, really cool and has amazing action kind of, in it. And I'm excited about that. I think the quality has turned out like fantastic on it. So that's something that is available to watch now. And then there is a kind of a Dragons spin-off of, current day, Dragons spin-off that's out now as well. That's really cool. So those are the big ones that you can watch now. And then, in the future, I think, the ones that I mentioned, like establishing, like kind of like looking into new genre kind of within animation, I think is super, super exciting.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, lots of stuff coming out, so a lot of things from DreamWorks TV. And, and finding it in a lot of different places also. I think that, a lot of streamers, a lot of different things, like I was saying earlier, we're really out there in a lot of locations.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, that's great. I really appreciate you being able to share this stuff with us. I've always loved, working with you guys and doing kind of fun stuff. So looking forward to many more years of that. But it's really great to see that the company that you could all fit into an elevator is as big as it is now.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, and it's been awesome. I'm so happy to have been able to be on this and join your podcast. And it's definitely loved in the industry. And just it's been great working with you as well. And kind of honestly, like some of those conversations and collaborations early on, like we couldn't have done it without you guys, and kind of talking through all of our issues and complicated things that we would want to do, that we had really smart people figure out for us. So thank you.
Took Vlado directly to your office. Say, here, you'll figure it out.
He's he's part of he's definitely part of the DreamWorks TV history for sure.
for sure. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on.
Thank you.